What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you love music like I do. So they teased the idea of a versus battle between Puffy, Sean Combs, P. Diddy versus Jermaine Dupri, and Puffy insisted that no, I need somebody, I need Dr. Dre. That's who I need to go against because that's where I am esteem-wise, and Dre is my peer. With all due respect, Jermaine Dupri, you're not on that level. Thanks, but no thanks, is basically the message. And then they did a FaceTime type call on Fat Joe's podcast. And so they, Snoop was on it, Joe was on it, Fat Joe was on it, Jermaine Dupri, and Puff Daddy. And they are now saying that Puff Daddy is accepting the challenge with Jermaine Dupri. But he said, I'm going to give you that smoke because you are not on my level. I've got more this, blah, blah, blah. And then he went into how much more esteemed of an artist, executive, just a name in the game and a game changer than Jermaine Dupri, saying nobody listens to Kross. Well, look, how this one plays out, because let's keep in mind, like, Puffy had a great career as an artist even after Biggie passed away. So not only did Bad Boy stay on its feet with artists like Mase with Harlem World and Puff Daddy's No Way Out album, that was Puff Daddy and the Family, because he also had The Lox, Black Rob, Faith Evans, and so forth. Mase obviously was a heavy hitter at the time. Biggie was still featuring on No Way Out because they still had Biggie on Victory, All About the Benjamins, Been Around the World, and I, all that, right? So just hits among hits among hits. I mean, Bad Boy was an empire from the mid-90s into the late 90s, turn of the century, into the 2000s, because that No Way Out wasn't Puffy's only successful album. He had hits on future albums. But if we're doing the Jermaine Dupri versus Puff Daddy thing, I'm thinking not so fast if you think Puffy's just running away with this. First of all, they have like, what, 20 songs? Even if you extended it to 30 songs, Jermaine Dupri has 10 #1 hits that he's written. So, this isn't going to be like, hey, you're out of bullets after the first 15 songs when you're talking about Jermaine Dupri. So not only was he managing and producing for, writing with the Brat, Kross, Xscape, Kick Off Your Shoes and Relax Your Feet. You can expect that one in the early rounds because that was 1993. Warm It Up, Kris, and Jump, Jump. These were 92. So even if you're talking early 90s, this is before Puffy was still at Uptown working for Andre Harrell's label. That's where he came up under when like Heavy D was one of the biggest rappers in the game. So while Puff was still cutting his teeth at Uptown, Jermaine Dupri was already had So Def up and running. And Jump was a #1 hit. And I'm not talking about #1 on the rap charts. I'm saying US charts, cross genre. So that was like Jermaine Dupri's first single produced. So how I see this one playing out, it depends on what the rules are. You have to set the parameters. Are we talking just as an artist, producer, or writer where you're actually putting your hands or your voice on the boards or the microphone on the track? Are you actually playing a part, a hands-on part on the song? Or do executive points count? Like, is Suge Knight able to, can he do a verses and do a Dr. Dre song, a Lady of Rage song, a Snoop Dogg song, a Tupac song? Like, if it's the case that Puffy's able to play, I don't know, Big Papa. I mean, he does say something. You and your friends, me and my friends. So he at least speaks on that one. But if you look at Puffy's Bad Boy catalog, like, the songs are produced by, if it was the early Bad Boy era, it could be the late Chucky Thompson, DJ Premier produced on Ready to Die, Easy Mo B produced a lot of Ready to Die, and he produced a lot of Tupac's Me Against the World, but that's another story. Easy Mo B is one of the most underrated producers in the game. But basically, Puffy had his hitmen early in the Bad Boy days, and then he had like a different group of hitmen in the late 90s. So now we're talking Stevie J of like reality show fame. Yes, Love and Hip Hop, that's Stevie J. Produced like Notorious Thugs. And then he had Nasheem Myrick was one of Puffy's hitmen. Mario Winans did a lot of writing and some producing. Derek D. Angeliti, Harv Pierre, Joe Hooker, who you hear on like a lot of the Black Rob hooks. He did a lot of production and songwriting. So this was like a situation where Puffy's name could be on the production, even if he's not even laying his hands on the board. So if we're gonna do Jermaine Dupri versus Puff Daddy, are we doing what they actually did, production-wise, songwriting-wise, or performance-wise? Or are you able to take an executive role and say, yeah, I supervised the project, had my name on it as an executive producer, therefore, yeah, that's my song, damn it. Sounds like that's what Puffy's saying. I mean, well, if that's the case, I mean, why don't you just do a Clive Davis versus David Geffen, where you could have somebody, Clive Davis doing a Whitney Houston song and David Geffen doing an Eagles song. Even if Clive Davis and David Geffen, or you do Jimmy Iovine, he'll play Dre, 50 Cent, and Eminem, right? Not to mention Nirvana, or, you know, just anybody who was under the Interscope umbrella. Like, so is this the kind of totem pole pecking order we're doing, where you could have exec versus exec? I feel like that should be like its own thing if you're gonna play that. But if you're gonna do verses in the spirit of the verses that we've seen thus far, where you had DJ Premier and the RZA going at it, Ghostface and Raekwon going at it, and so forth. I mean, unless you were writing the songs, like, you know, you might see somebody do a song where you're like, oh, wait, that was them? And it's like, yeah, because they wrote the song. I get that. But on an executive level, I feel like that should be its own thing if we're going to do that. But again, if we're kind of staying with the spirit of the verses as it's been thus far, I mean, executives would just run roughshod over all the artists and producers and songwriters, right? Because they were overseeing the whole thing. But I think that kind of plays against what verses is supposed to be. Because, I mean, if you were to have like DJ Premier versus Puffy, DJ Premier could play Unbelievable. That's the one that he produced for Biggie Smalls on Ready to Die. And then Puffy could just play the same damn song, Unbelievable, because, hey, I'm in charge, right? I was the overseer of it all, right? So, yeah, what are the parameters in a Jermaine Dupri versus Puff Daddy thing? Because I'll tell you what, when it comes to like Jermaine Dupri's songs that he actually played a part in, either performed or wrote and or produced, look, not only was it the early stuff with Kross and Xscape and the Brat, where he did Funkdafied, Gonna Give It To You, and the stuff on the Brat's second album, and Bow Wow's hits, you know, wrote them, produced a lot of the beats. Puffy wasn't like a beatsmith. He wasn't the guy cooking up the stuff. He wasn't the chef in this case. He wasn't the Pete Rock or Kanye West, DJ Premier, Lil Jon, Swiss Beats. He wasn't doing that. Whereas, yes, Jermaine Dupri, did you know he wrote Usher's My Way and produced My Way? Like, Usher, when he dropped My Way, that was Usher's second album. That thing took the game by storm. You know, R&B was changed. You got a new king in town, you know, along with maybe R. Kelly as the best R&B artist of like the mid to late 90s. Well, it wasn't only My Way with You Make Me Wanna Be the One to Quit that Jermaine Dupri produced and wrote, and My Way and Nice and Slow, that was like the smash single. That was bigger than You Make Me Wanna and My Way, Nice and Slow on the same album. Now, baby, tell me what you want to do with me, right? Well, in 95, Jermaine Dupri co-produced Always Be My Baby, the #1 hit by Mariah Carey. And like I said, he did the Brat stuff, all the Bow Wow stuff, but he also did Confessions. I mean, come on, that might be the best or biggest R&B album of the past 20 years. That's as Mount Rushmore as it gets in R&B in the modern era. And so, yes, he did Let It Burn. He didn't produce, yeah, that was Lil Jon, but he produced and wrote Burn. He Confessions Part 2, My Boo. That was the Usher duet with Alicia Keys. Even on the Usher album before that, from 2001, 8701, that album, he produced You Got It Bad by Usher. And then when Mariah Carey made another one of her several comebacks with the Emancipation of Mimi, that was Mariah Carey's last smash album. That was 2005. And Jermaine Dupri did We Belong Together, that hit #1. He produced and wrote that. Produced and wrote It's Like That by Mariah Carey from the same Emancipation of Mimi album. He did Shake It Off, which hit #2. He did Don't Forget About Us from the Emancipation of Mimi. That hit #1. He wrote and produced that. I mean, Nelly's Grills, Jermaine Dupri produced and co-wrote. So, look, this isn't a slam dunk for Puff Daddy, especially depending on how the rules play. Like, is he able to pick any song from Ready to Die? Like, he didn't produce those beats. He didn't write those songs. Like, but because he's an executive, you could just do that and do that. Because again, if that's the case, then there needs to be another tier or another style of verses for execs who basically were the supervisors of the whole project. Because there's production and then there's like actual producing when you are hands on the boards, creating the sounds that the listener hears. So yeah, let me know what you think about Jermaine Dupri versus Puff Daddy. I'm not saying Jermaine Dupri wins this. I'm just saying, yeah, don't act like they're not peers or equals, especially if you're talking about what they actually did musically. And I mean, Jermaine Dupri just like put Atlanta on the map in the early to mid 90s. Who were the popular rappers coming out of there? It was what, Outkast. I mean, if you're not talking Kris, Kross, they were huge in the early 90s. But there was Outkast. I mean, Goody Mob dropped Soul Food in 95. You had Ghetto Mafia. I don't know if y'all remember Ghetto Mafia from the early to mid to kind of late 90s, but yeah, in the 90s there was Ghetto Mafia, but Atlanta wasn't on the map like it is now. They took over the game, in the early 2000s and never looked back, right? But no, early to mid 90s, Jermaine Dupri was putting on big time, and through the late 90s into the early 2000s, Emancipation of Mimi was 2005, so you're talking from like 91, 92 to 2005. So it's not like Jermaine Dupri, some irrelevant flash in the pan or somebody who had his moment and then disappeared. No. Only one of these two guys between Puffy and Jermaine Dupri are actually in the Songwriting Hall of Fame, and it isn't Sean Combs, all right? So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you love music like I do. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.